So as you can tell, hopefully you can tell, we're moving from the micro to the macro throughout the course of the day, starting out talking about intrapsychic issues and issues in countertransference and supervision. And then we're going to be moving in the afternoon towards the wondrously complex world of doing addiction work in collaboration with multiple partner entities. So I hope you all had a good lunch somewhere out in the village. Couple of things before we start. There are some members of the addiction division that aren't presenting today. Many of the presenters are from the Addiction Division Executive Committee. Could members of the Addiction Division Executive Committee who aren't presenting please stand up and identify yourselves? So, and Lisa, could you just, do you have the strength to say your name and what you do? And a great new member, Lisa Litt, former director of the trauma program at, was it St. Luke's? And now in private practice. And Tracy?
Hi all, Tracy Ruggiero. I am actually the chief rep on the EC. I'm finishing my PhD here at the School for Social Research and Psychology, and I also teach full-time at Toobin.
And Janie? And where's Brian? Brian's an honorary member. Brian Fallon? Did he have to leave? Okay, good. And how about if members of the Addiction Division could raise their hands? Oh, I'm sorry, Alexandra Woods. Alexandra Woods, a long-standing... Are you a founding member of the Addiction Division or close to it, though? How many years have you been working on the Addiction Division? 20. Thank you. And Dr. Washington, a founding member, also going to be speaking. Addiction Division members, raise your hands. Amy Colley, who recently had a wonderful article on thefix.com. Thank you. And thanks to all of the other Addiction Division members that are in attendance. So without further ado, I'll introduce Joe Ruggiero, who is going to be talking about collaborating and protecting the therapeutic relationship.
Hi, I'm Joe Ruggiero. Ooh, sorry. And just explain who I am. I oversee outpatient programs at the Addiction Institute of New York, and we're part of Mount Sinai Hospital, Roosevelt Division. I'm also in private practice, so in my talking about collaboration, I can come from this from a lot of angles, in that I've been a treatment provider at a clinic where private practitioners and doctors have referred to us and collaborated in that way. And I've also been in practice where I've referred people to other agencies and hospitals. So I kind of know both sides of the story, I hope, and both challenges. It's nice to be here. There are a lot of people here who I work with and who I've worked with in the past, and there's some people I don't know at all. And in my collaboration, I was thinking, so if this talk is horrific, what would be the worst thing with the people I work with, like on Monday when I go in, they'll be like, oh, hi, Joe. Or is it the people I used to work with who will never speak to me again? But I'm going to just try to overlook that and go forward. Okay, so I just have a few scenarios of collaboration that I've been thinking about that are common for me. A mother calls and leaves you a message. She says, "Please call me back. I'm sure you have no idea what my son is really doing." She's worried about the messages he's getting in your therapy, about his drug use. She feels you're not being tough enough on him, and you encourage his use. A PO calls you stating that the client got a dirty urine and that he needs to go residential, and you need to find him that placement. Your coworker states in a staff meeting that some people find it very hard to set limits on their patients, and you wonder if she's talking about you. A private therapist who you really have a nice relationship with calls you, upset that a client had a difficult session in your group last night. She wonders if this group is really right for the client. So these are some common experiences that I've had, similar, that I'm going to try to talk about. And it made me think, like, why am I talking about this? Which I'm sure you're hoping he figured that out. Why am I talking about this? And there's something about, and I wondered, like, if I was in a mental health clinic, would I be talking about this? And I might, but there's something about the anxiety, as we talked about this morning, the legality of substance misuse, that at times gets a lot of people involved. So we're talking about family and significant others, our team members, our supervisors, EAPs, HRA, and other social service agencies, licensing boards, ACS, courts and POs, fellow mental health clinicians, psychiatrists, and more, medical doctors. It really runs the gamut. Recently, with HRA, I had an issue. Let me ask people, how many people work in clinics or hospitals? Okay, good. Some of this will be relevant, I hope. And so HRA, about a year or so ago, I've been working with this man for about 2 or 3 years off and on, at AI, not privately. And I believe he and I have a very good relationship, and I really care about this guy. And some people will recognize this who work with me because I was so pissed off. So HRA decided, because he had relapsed, even though he was doing better in a lot of ways, that he'd been at AI too long, so they referred him out. When HRA handles people, Medicaid and insurance. And they called me and they said, "We tried to call you, but you were not available," because I was seeing a patient. And they referred him out because they felt like throughout these years I had worked with him, but of course my work was not working because he had relapsed and needed detox. So they referred him to another program, which just infuriated me. Recently, another one of my clients who I've worked with, I've had to talk to because HRA is saying to him, again because he relapsed, even though he'd been doing very well and is going to school, that he has to be in an intensive program to get benefits, even though he's in school. So we had a conversation yesterday, like, what do you want to do about this? And these are kind of the dilemmas that I think a lot of us can be in clinics. I think this happens across SES. It happens in practice. It happens in clinic-based program. Debbie was talking to me this morning and was telling me about an incident where she was working with someone in practice who needed detox and the collaboration she needed to do with CMC and, maybe a detox, maybe a rehab, recovery coach. I know, I'm working it. I'm working the room, Debbie. Recovery coach, the family. It was a great example that came up spontaneously of just the kind of work that we do where we try to coordinate everybody. And I think one of the most powerful moments when you're in substance abuse is when you're really worried for someone and you think they need to go inpatient and they finally say, "I think you're right, I think I need to go inpatient." And then you're like, "Oh my God, where do I get a bed?" And just the tension. So it happens in practice and clinic, etc. At its worst, it may feel like this client is out of control, and it's your job to keep them in line and to make sure everyone is happy. Everyone has an agenda for the client, and they're all experts. I've had a lot of experience, and I say this with all due respect to families, where family members say, "I'd like to hear about your program." And I tell them about the program and our options and stuff like that. And I'm kind of telling them some of the struggles, because they often will say, my son needs to go inpatient to rehab. Well, that can be a little bit hard. I just wanted to da-da-da. And after all my lovely psychoeducation, they're like, I hear what you're saying, but you know what? They really need this. End of story. So we've sometimes been in those situations. So let's start by collaboration within the institution, the system and the counselor. When you work in a clinic or a hospital, you have a relationship to the clinic. I have a relationship to AI, and I also have a relationship to Mount Sinai Hospital Roosevelt Division. And so this is a collaboration. Clinics have rules and regs that you may or may not agree with. Issues about treatment depend on how much you trust the system you're in. Your feelings about the system may in fact impact your client. So, you know, it's intriguing because as a manager and a supervisor, I've always thought about, like, how do you help people, staff, like, have a connection to their clinic, which sounds odd, because you can work in a clinic and say, I do great work, but I really could care less about this place. I mean, hopefully not. But, like, I oversee someone who oversees an OTP, and that staff really cares about their clients, and they care about the clinic. Like, when the clinic is not running well, they're upset about it. And, like, how great is that they actually care about the larger picture? And we've all, you know, I've worked in clinics where I didn't really trust the clinic. You know, I like working in AI, and there are a lot of things that are good about it. The larger hospital system is tough, so I don't always trust the hospital to do the right thing. And so maybe, hopefully I'll have a job next week. But so sometimes I do things like I follow the patient around when they go to different units to make sure that things go well. We have a relationship to our clinics. So here's a story that we'll highlight. This is like not a good story, but I mean, it's a good story, but it's not. So let me just tell the story. So I get my PhD, and I have a client named Rose who's 55 years old. Whoa. Skip this version? Remind me later. Thank you. Okay. Skip this talk, Joe. This is like a mess of. Isn't that fair? Just leave the stage, Joe. You've done enough. So Rose is a 55-year-old African-American woman. So I start my first job, just get my PhD, and I'm working in MMT, in a methadone clinic. So I'm a new psychologist, and I meet this woman who's a 55-year-old African-American woman, and she was pretty great. So I meet with her. They assigned me to her because she had what they called a psychotic break. She was depressed, and she got psychotic, and she was hospitalized. So they had her see me. So I chatted with her a little bit for like 5-10 minutes, and she just turns around to me and she said, so, like, what do you do here? Like, what's the point? Like, what is the point of you? In a very nice way. I was a new psychologist, so I was a little bit like, I'm not quite sure I know what the point is, but I'll get there. Anyhow, long story short, she had issues with housing, and I helped her work around an eviction issue. I kind of realized early on, like, you may want to do lovely work with this woman, but she's about to get kicked out on the streets. I think you need to help her. So she and I developed this very lovely relationship where I was really, like, thrilled to work with her. We really did good therapy. So the clinic, because I was a psychologist, said, we would like you to present some of your clients, just so that we can know what you're doing, like, you know, inform the staff. So I presented her because I was so, like, proud of it. And it came out because it was a methadone clinic that before the break and hospitalization that she had been caught loitering and maybe selling her bottles. And so they were going to discharge her because they realized they should have discharged her 7 months ago. So that was an example of I was just horrified about the clinic and their decision that, like, they couldn't see beyond the rules and regs. First of all, this was 7 months later. And I also felt like I had thrown her under the bus back then. So it was an example of, like, my distrust of the larger system that I was working in. They didn't do it because I got crazy and kind of flipped out, and just really advocating was like, this is disgusting what's happening. And it didn't happen. But it really changed my relationship to that clinic. I loved the work that I was doing there, but I felt like I have to be careful about what I'm doing here. So that's our relationship to the program and the hospitals we work in. I'm also intrigued by the idea of a treatment team, and I oversee a whole bunch of them. And what does it mean to work as part of a team? I mean, how many people work as part of teams? Okay, I like that, but it's very challenging. So a healthy team for me can share different perspectives on a client, and clinicians can observe a variety of ways that the client interacts with them that capture different aspects of the patients. When multiple people work in intensive outpatient programs with people, there's like a whole bunch of transferences, like that come up around race and age and authority, and and gender. That is very fascinating. And these countertransference reactions can be rich. I always feel like in a healthy team, somewhere between all our conceptualizations lies the truth. Certain members can work in a way that others members can't, and can be very powerful to watch. Team members help each other when someone's burnt out. So there are people on some of the teams that I work with who I'm like, I just don't think I could do that level of work with that patient, and it's just really amazing to see them do that. Clients with trauma histories, for example, can elicit a lot of reactions from the team, such as protection and anger. So there was a client that we were working with a long time ago, a male client who had been very traumatized and sexually abused by several female members of his family. And he was a very intense guy. And so he came to us. Oh, you know what? I just realized. Okay, I'm going to present it anyway. I mixed up my presentations. He came to us with this very intense trauma history. And the team often had very powerful reactions to him. Some of us felt he had an opioid addiction. He felt that the opioid addiction was really helping him manage flashbacks and his trauma. And some of us felt like we were much too permissive with him and too flexible about extending our time with him. And other people felt incredibly protective of him. And the trauma really was powerful. We had to process this a lot because there were times where, you know, when you're a client who has been traumatized and has struggles with boundaries, when you're in a day program, stuff happens. So his boundaries with the clients weren't always great. Clients weren't always great with him. And it was powerful to kind of see our feelings about him because sometimes we felt like he was the aggressor. Sometimes we felt like he was a victim. And it was very rich. The truth of the matter was he had all those parts to himself, and the team was able to process that. So I'm just going to... An unhealthy team can be a team that struggles with personal and professional conflicts that leak into the treatment. There are just times where there's staff tension, and it gets played out with the clients. This happened more when I first started at AI, when some of the programs I ran, there was a lot of conflict. You would really see like the clients arguing who's the better counselor in this. The clients picked up that there was an issue here. So members need to process how they feel about things. And to avoid this, I think, from happening, team meetings can be very invaluable, but difficult. Sometimes we don't talk about our clients. We really talk about our struggles. Team members who struggle with being territorial or feel insecure, it can be difficult when you look at different perspectives. And team members need to have a shared goal and purpose. They need to be open to processing these differences. And I think they need to feel somewhat of a safe relationship or solid relationship to the leader and trust him. So drama, now I'll tell you about the drama at the Addiction Institute. So this is a little fresh. So about a month ago, it's also fresh, but that's the good news. So I come back from vacation, and there's been a lot of mishigas in one of the programs. Two clients who have really acted very inappropriately with each other sexually. They didn't have sex, but just like name-calling, offensive name-calling, and being like inappropriate with each other. And the staff has just had this hellish week. Before I even start, I showed up my first day, and one of the clients, who's very smart, came to see me before the program even started to tell me like his version, even though he had been asked to wait a little bit so that we can talk about this as a team. So I was in the middle of all this stuff, and our goal was these are two guys who are really struggling and have very difficult trauma histories. So we really wanted to retain them. We didn't want to lose them. To be honest with you, there was a part of me that kept thinking to myself, and I would never act on this, like my life would have been easier if we just kicked them out of treatment. I'd have a bad day. I'd be upset. But I would the rest of my week would be fine. It would be bad treatment, but I kept it would be horrible if I did that, but we really wanted to work with them, even though it was clear that the staff had a rough week and that I had to try to figure this all out, even though I wasn't there for when it mostly went down. It was stressful for all of us. So we talked about it with the community, we talked about it with the staff, and we really tried to make sure we were all on the same page. We were able to work a lot of this out, but it was stressful. For example, we met as a staff, okay, what are we going to do? What am I going to do? I'm going to say this and this. Okay, good. I go in the staff meeting, I talk about, and I was really, I think for me, I really wanted to protect these patients and their treatment, and I wanted to take care of the staff because they were pretty fried. So after the meeting, the community meeting, I was like, did that go well? Did that go great? Oh, yeah, that was good. And one of the staff members was like, you didn't do one thing that I told you to do. And was really annoyed with me, I don't think you listened to a word I said. I was like, I thought I listened to everything everybody said. It was very stressful. Now, so this kind of teamwork is not easy. It's intense. But the bottom line is that we as a team had to deal with the fact that, we're not going to always, this is not always going to go smoothly. There are going to be certain things that get played out where maybe it's not going to feel like they have my support as much. And as a team leader, I spoke to this person and said, I feel like I'm trying to make everybody happy, and I'm probably not going to be able to do that. And I just had to accept that. And he said, you're right. And he said, and we will live through this. This will continue. That to me was good teamwork, hard teamwork. The positive of it is that we retained these clients. God only knows what they're doing now in the program while we're here. Let's not think about that. They really did valuable interpersonal work with each other. It was really cool to see them work this out. I was very impressed. And I feel more connected to these clients. And I think they trust me a little bit more, even though they disagree with everything I do at the Addiction Institute. No, even though they are really the things they feel like I didn't handle well. But I feel like at least they know that I have their back. That to me is good collaboration and teamwork. All right. Okay. Collaboration internally and externally with outside sources, when it works its best, it's like a team effort. However, we all know that collaboration can be stressful because it can involve monitoring of a person and can set the therapist up as gatekeeper in the person's substance use. Some examples when a person's legally mandated to see you, or a medical professional who's being monitored by a professional agency such as CPH for doctors, or the PAP, which is for nurses. Those can be very hard situations. We talk about treatment models. Those clients are in treatment, and they are supposed to be sober. That is what CPH is telling them. And sometimes you can have kind of an odd role there. And some people would say you can't do treatment with people like that, but you don't have a choice when you work in a center. You really want to give people good care, but recognize these outside agencies. Some studies that have looked at collaboration, and there's a theme that good collaboration involves a sense of shared values. So I trust you, and you trust me, and we have similar values. And I think that's important. So there are all kind of mandates. I don't know if you ever talk to somebody who's not in the field. And sometimes I've had this experience where people are like, oh, you're in substance abuse. I say, yeah. And they're like, sometimes it's like they try to do this subtly. So are a lot of people, do they have to go to treatment with you? There's this fantasy that everybody in drug treatment is there because they've done something illegal and they've been arrested and they're coming to see me. But the truth of the matter is that there are all kind of mandates. There are legal mandates where courts order people to treatment, like DWI possession. There's formal mandates where an organization like a job or a licensing board says the person has to be in treatment. And there's informal mandates where personal ultimatums are made by family. There's a lot of ways to be mandated to treatment. It's not just about the law. Okay, let me just make sure. So I just thought I'd talk to you a little bit about working with POs and some experience and the legal system. And so we've done a good amount of this, and I'm always intrigued, and I'm sure you guys know a lot about this, probably more than I do. Not that that's going to stop me from talking. POs, what POs can and can't do. So we've had experiences with POs where people have legal mandates, and the PO is like the first example that I said before, you need to send this person to residential treatment. And sometimes it gets really stressful, like, oh my God, I have to do this. It's the law, you know. And sometimes, like, the PO is often in an interesting role where they may have a lot of suggestions, but sometimes they don't have the power. And it's hard to tease out, like, what really is going on between the client, you, and the PO, and what is your relationship. I think behaviorally it's important to do your best to get a clear understanding of what the PO wants from you and needs from a clinician. And you should include the client. Like, I will say to the client, what is it that they want from us? And I always like to know that, because some clients will say, I have no idea. And I'm like, well, I think we should learn, because that seems really important to me. And that's intriguing to me. Some people just feel very powerless, like, I don't know what to do. I just have to roll with this. And for the clinician, like, sometimes clinicians will say, well, should I do this? Do I have to call the PO? And I was like, well, what is your relationship with the PO? Like, how has this been defined? And I think that's really important to outline. Sometimes we can define what treatment is so that we can advocate for our clients. Like, for POs who are, and also the legal system and judges that are a little more open to us, we've had some nice moments where I felt like they actually listened to us about what we thought would be best for our client. And working with POs can also give clinicians a feeling like they've done something wrong. And so I'm supervising somebody, and she told me I could use this story. And she has a client who is mandated for treatment, and he didn't show up for his appointment. And she said to me in supervision, should I call the PO to tell them this? And I said, like, well, why would you do that? Now, we can all say, like, oh, why would she think that? But it stirs up all this anxiety of, like, oh, my God, I have to call. Like, it really is as if you've done something wrong and you now have to you just have to be very clear about what your role is with the client and help your client do their best to deal with the system. Motivational interviewing, of course, is really important here. It helps us look at people's motivations to be in treatment. And it allows people to acknowledge the fact that they wouldn't be in treatment if it wasn't for this mandate. The myth of drug treatment, I think, sometimes is that the majority of mandated clients who come to treatment are more likely, I'm sorry, let me say that a different way. There is a myth that most people who are in drug treatment are there for legal reasons, and that's not the case. There's also a myth that people have stable, consistent motivations around their drug use. The motivation never changes and never shifts, and this can be damaging to legally mandated clients because I think they get labeled as, this is the person who doesn't want to be in treatment, end of story. Whereas many people did not want to come through to my door to see me, but eventually maybe they kind of liked being there and they actually got something out of it. And I think it doesn't give people a chance to have multiple motivations that change over time. In a sample of 300 clients presenting for outpatient treatment, Wild found that the nature of the mandate was not as powerful a predictor as the interpretation of the reason why a client was in treatment when it came to retention and the person's perceived benefit of treatment. So it wasn't so much the nature of how they were mandated, it was really their perception of it. In another study, Wild found that 35% of legally mandated clients and 61% of other mandated clients did not initially report that they had perceived coercion to be in treatment. It wasn't their experience. He uses self-determination theory to discuss an innate desire we have to be autonomous. And so people may be mandated, but that doesn't mean their experiences is that they're forced to be in treatment. Another study that I thought was interesting was that clients who had a high level of external treatment coercion were perceived by counselors to be less interested in treatment, regardless of their self-reported motivation. And I thought that's sad. Like, we make an assumption sometimes that they don't want to be there. So 2 vignettes. We were working with a client who I believe he was in a treatment center, and he's a gay man who uses methamphetamine. And we have a specific program for that. So the PO that he works with knew of our program and really advocated that the client be able to come to our program, which was great. So he shows up, he gets evaluated by me, and I just was like, ooh, he has no interest in being here. He comes to group and really says, I don't know why I'm here. I got caught with a great deal of methamphetamine. I don't have a problem. And I moderated my use for years. So, he came in ready to roll. And, we were like, okay, you're not happy to be here. You don't want to be here. And he had a PO who was pretty involved with him. In fact, as an aside, one day the PO showed up because he would come and do site visits and toxicology, and could do toxicology. And I was very nice. I was like, oh, hi, how are you doing? Oh, he's in group now. Why don't you wait here? And that did not make him happy because I guess when your PO shows up, what do I know? I don't have a PO, but I'm supposed to get him right then and there. So the client actually came up to me later and was like, he said, I got the biggest kick out of what you just did to my PO. And I had no idea I did it. I thought it was like good. I thought it was good manners. So anyway, as the client progressed in treatment, we were working with the PO, but we were also talking about how angry he was that he was mandated for treatment. And what scared me a little bit about him was he was so pissed off that I worried that he would make his situation worse. So in group therapy, I said, I know you're upset about being here, but can I just say, I'm a little worried about this. I'm a little worried how you're going to play this out. And he ignored me. And I even said, I think that interpretation just left the room and went out the window. And he said, yeah, it did. However, the good news is that, he really, at some point, had an honest discussion. I don't think I have a drug problem, but I want to resolve this issue. And I think by our having a very MI approach, we helped him clear up this situation. He was always very open and said, listen, I'm not sure where this is going, but I'm going to stay sober for the time that I need to stay sober, and I don't know what's going to happen in the long term. In fact, and this is a very nice story. I'm not saying they'll work this. Well, I'm going to tell you one story that didn't work that way. He actually is continuing in treatment after the mandate just because he wants to see what he's going to do and how maybe he's going to go back to moderating, but he wants to be in treatment while that happens. That's great. We worked with another guy who was in a similar situation with us, but who was just, I think, so narcissistically injured by this experience. And don't get me wrong, he'd gotten arrested, he was a felon, and I felt that the way that it was just hard to help him get through this system because he was so hurt and angry by what had happened to him. And sometimes clients have these external mandates, and it's hard to watch them handle it maybe in a way that I don't think they should handle it. And that didn't go as smoothly. So then we also work with other mental health providers. Often when a client comes to treatment, they're working with a therapist who may not feel as comfortable with substance use, so they come to us. Or sometimes we work with private clinicians who work with substance users, but who are really a little stressed out by their clients and want to give them more structure. Treatment centers provide that structure and social support. If you have a client who's very isolated, that collaboration can be very nice. Therapists with connections to clients can use this as leverage. We're working with somebody now who's really struggling to make it to us, but has a nice connection to his psychiatrist, and she's, I think, hopefully encouraging him that he'll finally get to us. One of the biggest issues is lack of communication, and I'm sure I'm guilty of this, so I'm not naming names. I had a time where I sent somebody as a private clinician to a rehab, and they sent him to Florida to a long-term halfway house and never even spoke to me about, and I had worked with the client for 3 years, and they never even told me that they did that. We all have these moments where there's a lack of communication. With psychiatrists and other medical people, sometimes I think our collaboration can be very rich because we provide data because we see our clients a lot. Some clients struggle to speak to other providers because providers and therapy can help them to, I'm sorry. some clients struggle to speak to other providers, and therapy can help them discuss what they're experiencing. There are times where I've worked with people about, like, how do you want to talk to your psychiatrist about what's going on? Outside therapists have long-term relationships with people that sometimes get ignored in treatment. Like, you've worked with someone for 2-3 years, I refer them to they get to refer to rehab, and it's like that relationship never existed. Meanwhile, you've worked with them for 2 to 3 years. It's like such information. Sometimes we clash with outside clinicians because they have different philosophies from us, and that can be stressful. And also, I think there's also a tension between the referral source and the conflicting therapist, that, like, when you work with people, you want them to refer patients to you. And also it can be intimidating to speak to outside clinicians. There's also the issue of ACS and EAPs and licensing boards. There are times where we work with these agencies, and sometimes when you get referrals for ACS, what can be hard, or even licensing boards, is people have to look at what their feelings about, not that they have to look at, but what comes up is that people have feelings about being parents and being doctors and nurses, and sometimes that can be harder to explore. So, for example, we've worked with clients who I think really are struggling with, like, do I really want to be a mother to this child and have ACS cases? But that's such a hard thing to say, oh, let me come to group and ask the group, Doc, I'm really struggling with whether I want to parent my child. It's like, oh my God, that's so powerful. Research shows that substance abuse treatment can help people prevent out-of-home placements for children. Adams found that one value clash was that substance abuse clinicians are more likely to have negative attitudes about parents who use substances when compared to ACS workers. The concern, which is sad, is that substance abuse clinicians may actually be less hopeful that their clients can parent. Also, when people get toxicologies, we were talking about toxins before, based on external mandates, it can really backfire. And so I'm working with this doctor who I think is really motivated to better his life and has been well. And he said, regardless, I get 4 urines a month, and as soon as that 4th urine comes, I always think there's a little opening here for me to do something. And he said, I don't normally think about this, but there's something about the externalization that I think can be really rough. Some clinics, in terms of medical collaboration, not only provide substance abuse counseling, but there's a collaboration between mental health providers and medical professionals. This can provide a very holistic model of treatment. Part of why I like working in OTP clinics, methadone programs, Suboxone programs, is there's doctors and nurses there. I think it's so cool. It's like one-stop shopping. Clients who misuse substances can have a place where they feel less stigmatized. You're working with medical professionals who work with people who have substance use problems, as opposed to going to other centers where maybe they don't want as much help, or they get stigmatized. There's so many medical issues connected to substance use, like HIV, smoking, Hep C, and people really develop institutional transferences to their clinics. And health homes and integrated care really seem to be the wave of the future. So just a few tips. Collaboration with outside. I think it's important for us to define our boundaries and your relationship with others, and what outside resources need to know, and how does that get defined by the client. Understand when you might be in a situation where this can jeopardize your client. So if an agency wants certain information from you and you're uncomfortable with that, you have to be aware of that conflict. The mandate is also between the client and the outsider. And though you may be involved, it's about their relationship. I think a lot of times clinicians get sucked into, like, I need to do this because that's the right thing to do, not even for their clients. Like, this is between the client and this outside provider, and you want to process with your client, like, this is what they're doing may put them in a situation that jeopardizes them. I think it's important for us to advocate for our clients. Some collateral contacts, some people don't want to collaborate with us. Like, some people refer people to us, and they really don't want to hear about it much. I never have ever said to anyone, In a talk I've ever done, I've never talked about paperwork in my life, but this is the first time. Consent forms are good. It's good to write a consent form and say, this is what I have to say, this is not what I have to say. I don't want to report on how well the client's doing. If I have to do toxicologies and report that, I'll do that. Be clear. Talk to your supervisors. Remind yourself of your role with the client. Be clear with outside sources what you can and cannot speak to. Be careful about, like, outside sources. I mean, if you work in a hospital or any kind of clinic, could you tell me this person's ready to go back to work? They love to ask sometimes for things that, like, I don't, that's not, could you tell me if this person's a good parent? Well, like, that's not what I do. So be clear, like, no, that's not the letter I can write for the client, and you can advocate for your client without saying, this person's a great parent. Sometimes we get asked to do things that are just not appropriate, and be clear with the client what you write. I think the barriers are feeling insecure, a lack of shared values, a lack of trust about other systems, and negative opinions. Let me just look at my time. Okay, I'm going to skip this story. Ooh. So I'm just going to finish with a story that happened with me that involved me collaborating with a therapist, a psychiatrist, and psychopharmacology, the front desk. So Lisa's a 32-year-old woman who presented at the front desk, and I was like walking innocently down the hall, as I sometimes do. She was angry. She felt the front desk staff was rude to her and not helpful, and she was having problems with her Suboxone prescription due to insurance issues. Now, I was supervising her therapist. She didn't know that, though. And she felt that the psychiatrist she was working with was not available to her and did not listen to her needs or call her back in a timely manner. So as director of the clinic, she complained to me and blamed me as well for the issue. Clearly, I did not care that people got good care. I hired the psychiatrist, which I didn't do, and this person's a bad psychiatrist, so what do I care? So she was just furious with me. I have to say, she was very angry with me. She never crossed the line and was like nasty. She never told me I was fat. She never told me I had no hair. She never told me I was ugly. She was actually, her therapist had done good work with her. But she was pissed. I tried to meet with her and the psychiatrist. It clearly wasn't going well, so I tried to collaborate there. And so she had a whole, I'm not going to go into the details, I mean, all the stuff with medication and changes in insurance, it's horrific what people have to go through. But to be honest with you, it was dead man walking, and I was the dead man. I used every technique to be available to her, and I said, I'm really sorry. I don't need you to be sorry. I need you to do something. I was dead man. And so finally what I did, because I learned this a long time ago, is I accepted the fact that I was dead. So she just berated me, and publicly berated me, but never inappropriately. That shows you how low my life has gotten, that I was like, she wasn't inappropriate with me. And I really felt bad for her. I really did, because I really felt she had gotten screwed by her insurance system. I felt it was horrific. Like, you need Suboxone, you're sober, and I can't get this medication. So she had me on her side, though she would never know that. She never felt that. So I helped her work with the psychiatrist. We have a pharmacy in the hospital that I went down with, continued to berate me in front of the pharmacist. I mean, it was just like, and thank God I was in a very self-regulated place, thank God, that I just like rolled with it. I was like, okay. And I kept saying, like, I'm just trying to help you. And she's like, well, this is not going to help us at all. And I was like, but could you at least allow me to try to help you? Okay. So why am I telling you this story? Is this a bad day for Joe or a therapeutic moment? This is a client. I think it's a therapeutic moment, I hope, who has a dependent on prescription opioids. She comes from a family that's full of substance misuse. In addition, she comes from a very violent family, and she's often the victim of such violence by other siblings, and a parent who's never been able to provide a stable household. She enrolled in drug treatment, she stabilized herself, and she works with this very empowering female therapist who I supervise and love, who has really helped this woman change her life. Her complaints to me protected her connection to the therapist so that she could have this good relationship and I could be the bad guy. And it gave her a forum to have a voice without retribution. In addition, she was able to believe that she had the right to good, solid treatment to voice her concerns when she felt abused by the system. She's met with me to tell me, her complaints about what goes on in the hospital. I listen to her. She always says to me, I don't really think that I should be here. And she always thinks I'm going to think something bad of her. So this to me felt like a good therapeutic moment. So I once had a supervisor who told me therapy happens by accident, and I think this is a good example. When dealing with collaterals and working with others, never forget that you're a clinician and that the actions you take need to have therapeutic value and to support your connection to the client as best as possible. Thank you.